shortest possible time, and that meant a velocity here that we can't check without a spiral. However, even at that, we saved a lot of time. You can save quite a bit more, though, by having a rocket plane come out to meet us, somewhere around 15 or 20,000 kilometers, depending upon where you want to land. With their power-to-mass ratio, they can match our velocity and still make the drop direct. Guess I'll do that. Thanks. And the operative called his chief, only to learn that his suggestion had already been acted upon.
"We beat you to it, Lyman," Sam smiled. "The Silver Sliver is out there now, looping to match your course, acceleration, and velocity at 22,000 kilometers. You'll be ready to transfer?"
"I'll be ready." And the quartermaster's ex-clerk went to his quarters and packed his dunnage bag. In due time the long slender body of the rocket plane came into view, creeping down upon the spaceship from above, and Cleveland bade his friends goodbye. Donning a spacesuit, he stationed himself in the starboard airlock. Its atmosphere was withdrawn, the outer door opened, and he glanced across a bare 100 feet of space at the rocket plane which, keel ports fiercely aflame, was breaking her terrific speed to match the slower pace of the gigantic ship of war. Shaped like a toothpick, needle-pointed fore and aft, with ultra-stubby wings and vanes, with flush-set rocket ports everywhere, built of a lustrous silvery alloy of noble and almost infusible metals, such was the private speedboat of the chief of the TSS, the fastest thing known, whether in planetary air, the stratosphere, or the vacuous depth of interplanetary space. Her first flashing trial spins had won her the nickname of the Silver Sliver. She had had a more formal name, but that title had long since been buried in the departmental files. Lower and slower dropped the Silver Sliver, her rockets flaming even brighter until her slender length lay level with the airlock door. Then her blasting discharges subsided to the power necessary to match exactly the Chicago's deceleration.
"Ready to cut, Chicago. Give me a 3-second call," snapped from the pilot room of the Sliver.
"Ready to cut," the pilot of the Chicago replied. "Seconds. 3, 2, 1, cut." At the last word the power of both vessels was instantly cut off, and everything in them became weightless. In the tiny airlock of the slender craft crouched a space line man with coiled cable in readiness, but he was not needed. As the flaring exhaust ceased, Cleveland swung out his heavy bag and stepped lightly off into space, and in a right line he floated directly into the open doorway of the rocket plane. The door clanged shut behind him, and in a matter of moments he stood in the control room of the racer, divested of his armor and shaking hands with his friend and co-laborer, Frederick Rodebush. "Well, Fred, what do you know?" Cleveland asked, as soon as greetings had been exchanged. "How do the various reports dovetail together? I know that you couldn't tell me anything on the wave, but there's no danger of eavesdroppers here."
"You can't tell," Rodebush soberly replied. "We're just beginning to wake up to the fact that there are a lot of things we don't know anything about. Better wait until we're back at the hill. We have a full set of ultra-screens around there now. There's a couple of other good reasons, too. It would be better for both of us to go over the whole thing with Virgil, from the ground up. And we can't do any more talking anyway. Our orders are to get back there at maximum, and you know what that means aboard the Sliver. Strap yourself solid in that shock absorber there, and here's a pair of earplugs."
"When the Sliver really cuts loose, it means a rough party, all right," Cleveland assented, snapping about his body the heavy spring straps of his deeply cushioned seat. "But I'm just as anxious to get back to the hill as anybody can be to get me there." "All set." Rodebush waved his hand at the pilot, and the purring whisper of the exhaust changed instantly to a deafening, continuous explosion. The men were pressed deeply into their shock-absorbing chairs as the Silver Sliver spun around her longitudinal axis and darted away from the Chicago with such a tremendous acceleration that the spherical warship seemed to be standing still in space. In due time the calculated midpoint was reached, the slim space plane rolled over again, and, mad acceleration now reversed, rushed on toward the earth, but with constantly diminishing speed. Finally a measurable atmospheric pressure was encountered, The needle prow dipped downward, and the Silver Sliver shot forward upon her tiny wings and vanes, nose rockets now drumming in staccato thunder. Her metal grew hot. Dull red, bright red, yellow, blinding white. But it neither melted nor burned. The pilot's calculations had been sound, and though the limiting point of safety of temperature was reached and steadily held, it was not exceeded. As the density of the air increased, so decreased the velocity of the man-made meteorite. So it was that a dazzling lance of fire sped high over Seattle, lower over Spokane, and hurled itself eastward, a furiously flaming arrow, slanting downward in a long, screaming dive toward the heart of the Rockies. As the now rapidly cooling greyhound of the skies passed over the western ranges of the Bitterroots, it became apparent that her goal was a vast, flat-topped, and conical mountain, shrouded in livid light, a mountain whose height awed even its stupendous neighbors. While not artificial, the hill had been altered markedly by the Triplanetary engineers who had built into it the headquarters of the Secret Service. Its mile-wide top was a jointless expanse of gray armor steel. The steep, smooth surface of the truncated cone was a continuation of the same immensely thick sheet of metal. No known vehicle could climb that smooth, hard, forbidding slope of steel. No known projectile could mar that armor. No known craft could even approach the hill without detection. Could not approach it at all, in fact, for it was constantly enclosed in a vast hemisphere of lambent violet flame through which neither material substance nor destructive ray could pass. As the Silver Sliver, crawling along at a bare 300 miles an hour, approached that transparent, brilliantly violet wall of destruction, a violet light filled her control room and as suddenly went out, flashing on and off again and again. "Giving us the once-over, eh?" Cleveland asked. "That is something new, isn't it, Fred?" "Yes, it's a high-powered ultra-wave spy," Rodebush replied. "The light is simply a warning, which can be carried if desired. It can also carry voice and vision." "Like this," Samms' voice interrupted from the powerful dynamic speaker upon the pilot's panel, and his clear-cut face appeared upon the television screen. "I don't suppose Fred thought to mention it, but this is one of his inventions of the last few days. We are just trying it out on you. It doesn't mean a thing, though, as far as the Sliver is concerned. Come ahead." A circular opening appeared in the wall of force, an opening which disappeared as soon as the plane had darted through it, and at the same time her landing cradle rose into the air through a great trapdoor. Slowly and gracefully, the space plane settled downward into that cushioned embrace. Then cradle and nestled Sliver sank from view, and, turning smoothly upon mighty trunnions, the plug of armor drove solidly back into its place in the metal pavement of the mountain's lofty summit. The cradle elevator dropped rapidly, coming to rest many levels down in the heart of the hill, and Cleveland and Rodebush leaped lightly out of their transport, through her still hot outer walls. A door opened before them, and they found themselves in a large room of full daylight illumination, the anteroom of the private office of Virgil Samms. Chiefs of departments sat at their desks, concentrated upon problems or at ease, according to the demands of the moment. Televisotypes and recorders flashed busily but silently. Calmly efficient men and women went wontedly about the all-embracing business of Triplanetary's space-pervading Secret Service. "Right away, Norma?" Rodebush paused briefly before the desk of the chief's private secretary, but even before he had spoken she had pressed a button, and the door behind her swung wide. "You two do not need to be announced," the attractive young woman smiled. "Go right in." Samms met them at the door eagerly, shaking hands particularly vigorously with Cleveland. "Congratulations on that camera, Lyman!" he exclaimed. "You did a wonderful piece of work on that. Help yourselves to smokes and sit down. There are a lot of things we want to talk over. Your pictures carried most of the story, but they would have left us pretty much at sea without Costigan's reports. But as it was, Fred here and his crew worked out most of the answers from the dope the two of you got, and what few they haven't got yet, they soon will have." Nothing new on Conway?